Hello everyone, my name is Kimberly Sharma and I am a part of the zoology faculty at Lalans coaching classes. Today we'll be starting with the topic Animal Kingdom. This is chapter 4 of the NCERT class 11. And today we will just do a little bit of introduction on what the chapter is and what it consists of. Firstly, the entire animal kingdom has been divided into different groups. They've been divided into different groups. Since we cannot study animals individually, we have to divide them into little groups and we have to look into those groups to find out what kind of animals we find in them. All these groups, they have common characters. And in order to find out what animal to put into what group, we have to find out what character is present in what kind of animals. Now these common characters, they are found out by checking certain criteria. In today's class, we will be studying what kind of criteria is checked by biologists to find out what animal has it and where it is put in which group it is classified into. When we come to characters, getting into the criteria of it, the first criteria we have is called levels of organization. Levels of organization. We have 3 levels of organization, or to be more specific, we have 4 levels of organization. The first is called the cellular level. In the cellular level, one particular cell, it is responsible for all the functions. Responsible for all functions. In this cell, what happens is, in animals which have a cellular level of organization, the cells will not form tissues. It will neither form organs nor it will be forming organ systems. But one particular cell, or let's say more than one particular cell, they perform all the functions together. But they are not forming tissues. Individual cell is performing all the function. That is what is seen in the group Porifera, where cells perform all the functions. So digestion is intracellular, respiration is intracellular, excretion is intracellular, where intracellular means within the cell. In the second type, we have the tissue level of organization, where cells together, they make up certain tissues. The next one is tissue level, where cells together, they make up particular tissues and they perform functions together. So here we can finally see there is a division of labor. Division of labor. So their work has been divided. In the previous organization, one particular cell was doing everything. In this level, layers of tissues. Here we can see layers. So layers of tissues, they are performing functions, due to which there is a division of labor. The work has been divided into different layers. So we can say a particular tissue might perform digestion. Some other particular tissue, they might perform excretion. Some other tissue, they might perform respiration. Moving on, as the animals become more complex, as the animals are getting more complex, the tissues start forming specific organs. They form specific organs where one particular function is performed by one particular organ. particular or specific function. Organ performs a specific function. Here an example of this is the flame cells that is present in platyhelminths, which performs the function of osmoregulation. So flame cells found in the group platyhelminths. Platyhelminths are a group of flatworms, and these have flame cells that perform the function of osmoregulation, that is the salt water balance in the body. Moving on from this, as the organism becomes more complex, as the groups become more complex, we finally come into the organ system level of organization. The organ system, where many organs together, they make up a particular organ system, and the whole system performs a particular function. Now as we move forward, there is more and more division of labor. The example of this is our digestive system, or our respiratory system, or the cardiovascular system, which has specific functions related to it, and every organ system is different. Every organ system has just a specific set of functions which is not interfered with by other organ systems. This is one of the criteria which is checked by different biologists to see what kind of system does the organism have, whether it has cellular level, whether it has tissue level, whether it has organ level or organ system of organization, and they put the animals into certain groups. The next criteria here is the types of different organ systems. The first one is our digestive system. When an organism is observed, firstly it is looked upon and they check whether the organism has only one pore within it or two pores within it, where one pore specifies an incomplete digestive system. Now one pore is responsible for taking in food also. It is responsible for expulsion of excreted materials also. In another type, there is the complete digestive system, where there are two different pores, two separate pores, one for taking in food materials and another excretory pore through which excreted materials are taken out. This is the type of digestive systems. Next thing that is observed is the cardiovascular system, or the circulatory system to be specific. What happens is, there are two types of circulatory systems. Circulatory systems. One is called the open type and the another one is called the closed type. Now in the open type of circulatory system, we have an absence. There is an absence of any kind of blood vessels, because of which all the organs present in the organism's body, it is bathed with blood. Since blood is not flowing through any pipelines, there is an absence of blood vessels. So the entire body of the organism, the internal body, is filled with blood. And the next type is the closed type, where we see the presence of arteries, veins and capillaries. A hint to remember this is, if there is a presence of capillaries, then it is a closed type of circulatory system. And if an organism, it has an absence of blood vessels, we can say that the organism has an open type of circulatory system. After this, another criteria that is observed here is the organization of germ cells. Before coming to the topic, germ cells are those cells which is formed at the very beginning of the development of any organism. Now these germ cells, they are responsible for making up the whole body of an organism. Sometimes in some cases there are 2 layers of germ cells which is responsible for making up an entire organism. In between those 2 layers we have a jelly like, in between those germ cell layers we have a jelly like consistency of fluid filled space that is called the mesoglia. The outer layer is called the ectoderm. The inner layer is called the endoderm. Now here the word ecto, it means outside, and the word endo, it means inside. So obviously this layer is responsible for making all the body parts that are within the body. For example, the gut or the food pipe. And the ectoderm is responsible for making those organs or those parts of the body that are within the outer periphery, like the skin. If an organism has only 2 layers, or if an organism is made out of only 2 layers of cells, of germ cells to be specific, you can write germ cells here, then it is called a diploblastic organism. Diploblastic, where di can signify 2 for 2 germ layers. In some organisms what happens? The entire organism is made out of 3 germ layers. 3 germ layers. The first, the outermost, will still be your ectoderm. The middle layer will now, since it has got cells now it will be named as the mesoderm. So we can write here, this will be the ectoderm, the ectoderm layer. This will be the mesoderm layer, and the innermost layer of cells or the innermost layer of tissue can be called as the endoderm tissue. Organisms that are made out of these 3 germ layers are called triploblastic organisms. So this is also one of the criteria to see where to place a new organism pertaining to what kind of germ cells it is made out from. Okay, moving on. The next criteria that we have here, depending or looking at these germ cells and how they form the body, the next criteria is the presence of a coelom, or more specifically the body space or the body cavity. Now in some organisms what happens is, as we had already mentioned, let's say this is the food pipe or the gut, and this is the body of the organism. The food pipe is basically made out of endoderm cells. So these will be your endoderm cells which make the food pipe. The outer part of the body will be made out of the ectoderm cells. Ectoderm cells. Now both these endoderm cells and ectoderm cells in some animals, they will fill up the entire body space. They filled up the entire body space. So there is no space in the body, there is no cavity. Cavity here means a space. Since the cells have filled up everything, there is no specific space in the body. The body is overcrowded with cells. There is no space. These kind of organisms are basically flat organisms like flatworms. The example of a flatworm is a tapeworm, Taenia solium, which has basically no body cavity or no coelom. That's why these kind of organisms, they are called acoelomates. Acoelomates. Is for absent or absence of coelom. Does not mean the body doesn't have any kind of cavity. It has a cavity. It has a cavity in the form of a gut. But this does not qualify as a coelom. Why? Because to be a coelom, the body cavity should be covered with mesoderm cells. As we had mentioned earlier, the mesoderm cells are the middle layer cells. Should be covered with mesoderm, or we can mention mesoderm cells. Okay. In some organisms now what happens is, there's just little amount of space. Just little amount of space. And this is covered with smaller mesoderm cells. Just little space. Not the whole cavity, but just little pockets of space. We can call them little pockets of space. And apart from this, the other spaces, they are filled with endoderm and ectoderm. Okay, so here we can just see little pockets of space, and this region or this kind of body organization can be called as pseudocoelomates. Pseudocoelomates, where the word pseudo means false. Now we cannot call them coelomates also, because the entire body does not have a space, but it has some amount of space. Because of that some amount of space, the terminology used here is called pseudocoelomates or false coelomates. After this, we have some animals whose body or the internal body, they have a huge amount of space. So here we can make endoderm cells as usual. Then we have the ectoderm cells, which are covering or which are making up the outer region of the body. And then within that, we have little mesoderm cells that has covered up the entire body cavity or the entire section of the body, internal body, and it is giving or it is making up a huge space within the body. Now this huge space, this is what is termed as the body cavity or the coelom, where it has qualified to become a coelom. Why? Because it has the presence of mesoderm cells which is covering up the entire cavity. And this is one of the criteria which is used to explain what kind of organism any new organism is and where it should be placed, seeing whether it does not have a coelom, or whether it has a pseudocoelom, or whether it has a coelom or a body cavity. The next criteria is called body symmetry.